Hello, my dear friends, and welcome back. Tonight we travel to a quiet place by the sea, a pier where the wind never stops whispering and the fog moves like a living thing. They call it Sablewind Pier, a peaceful walkway over dark water, where lovers stroll, fishermen wait, and lanterns glow softly in the night. But tonight, something is wrong, because across those wooden planks, someone is walking with sinister footsteps. And before this night ends, one person will be found dead, and every soul in this seaside town will become a suspect. So settle in, get comfortable, and let us begin our mystery with Hercule Poirot. Chapter 1. The pier that never sleeps, Sablewind Pier, had a way of pretending it was innocent. By day it looked harmless, sunlight on varnished railings, children begging for peppermint sticks, couples leaning over the edge to watch the slow churn of green water. By night it became something else. The boards creaked like old joints. The sea breathed beneath it, and fog rolled in low and patient, softening edges the way a liar softens truth. Etienne Parmentier first saw the pier at dusk, when the lamps were just beginning to glow. He had arrived in Sablewind not to work, he told himself. He had come for air, for quiet, for the kind of seaside stillness that could rinse the mind clean. But Parmentier had learned a bitter fact about himself. Quiet never lasted long around him. He stepped from the little coastal train with a modest leather case, a neatly folded coat over one arm, and the faint, polite expression of a man who preferred his thoughts organized. His mustache was trimmed as precisely as a line drawn with a ruler. His shoes, though travel-worn, had been buffed that morning at the station. An old advertisement board flapped in the wind like a nervous tongue. "Welcome to Sablewind, where the sea keeps your secrets," Parmentier read it twice. He didn't smile. Outside, the town smelled of salt and coal smoke and something sweet, caramel perhaps, from a kiosk near the pier entrance. The streets were narrow, the buildings leaning together like conspirators. He walked slowly toward the water, allowing the town to introduce itself. There were faces that looked away too quickly. There were men who spoke in low tones at corners and stopped when he approached. There were women who watched from windows as if they were measuring how much trouble his arrival might bring. And then the pier appeared, a long wooden spine reaching into the darkening sea. At its entrance stood a decorative archway, paint peeling, letters faded, Sablewind Pier. Beneath the arch, a row of lantern posts marched outward, each lamp glowing warm gold against the growing blue of evening. Parmentier paused. In the soft lamplight he saw the boards under his feet were damp, as if the pier had sweated. A young woman came out of the nearest stall, tugging down shutters with practiced strength. Her hair was pinned neatly, her sleeves were rolled. Her face held the calm seriousness of someone who had learned not to expect kindness. "Closing," she said without looking at him. "I merely admire," Parmentier replied, voice gentle with an accent that carried the continent. "It is, how you say, charming." She looked up then, and her gaze sharpened. "Charming," she repeated. "That's one word for it." Her stall bore a small painted sign, Vale's Theatre Treats, tickets and sweets. A faint smell of sugar drifted out. The woman's fingers were sticky with caramel. "You are not from here," she said. "No." "Holiday?" "Something like that." Her eyes flicked to his case, then to his face. "Sablewind isn't good for holidays." "Why?" She hesitated. Just a breath of delay, but Parmentier noticed. "The sea makes people strange." "That is true everywhere," he said. "No." She lowered her shutters with a final clang. "Here, it makes them worse." Before he could ask her name, she turned the key in her stall door and walked away down the pier, her boots tapping quick little beats. Parmentier watched her vanish into the soft fog that was already beginning to thread between the lamps. Then he stepped forward. Halfway down the pier stood a larger building, an old hall repurposed as a social club. Light spilled from its windows, laughter, too loud, too sharp, escaped with the warmth. A sign outside read, "Strake's Pier Club." Parmentier frowned. In towns like this, you could often find the name of the powerful simply by following where the light was brightest. He pushed open the club door. Inside, the air was hot with gin and perfume. Men in coats and women in evening hats stood around small tables. A gramophone played something cheerful that did not match the stiff smiles. And at the center of the room sat Gideon Strake. He was a broad man with silver hair and a watch chain that flashed whenever he moved his hand. His face was ruddy, his eyes pale and unpleasantly calm. He looked like a man who had never been told no in his life. When Parmentier entered, Strake's gaze snagged on him immediately as if he could smell unfamiliarity. A thinner man approached Parmentier, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Sir, members only." "I am sorry," Parmentier said, already stepping back, but Strake lifted a hand. "No, no, let him stay." Parmentier turned. Strake studied him with the bored curiosity of a man examining a tool. "You're not local," Strake said. "I am visiting." "And what are you?" Strake asked. "A teacher, a banker, a priest?" Parmentier's expression remained pleasant. "A private consultant." Strake laughed at that, too loudly. "That's what they call it now, is it?" Some of the guests laughed along. Anxious to please, Parmentier inclined his head. "And you, monsieur, you are the owner of this charming establishment." Strake's smile was thin. "I own more than this establishment. I own this pier in everything but paperwork." The thin man beside Parmentier swallowed, as if Strake had said something dangerous. Parmentier's eyes drifted, calm, observational, toward a woman seated just behind Strake. She was poised, elegant, her lips slightly parted as if she might speak but chose not to. Her dress was dark, her jewelry minimal. Her gaze was not on Parmentier but on the room itself, tracking reactions like a hawk. "That," Parmentier thought, "is the true brain." Strake leaned forward. "We don't get many foreigners. You here for the sea, the fish, the romantic fog?" "Perhaps," Parmentier said. "Then you should know something." Strake's voice lowered, and the room leaned toward it as if pulled. "Sablewind has rules. You keep your head down, you mind your business, and you don't go snooping where you're not wanted." Parmentier met his eyes. "I never snoop." Strake's smile tightened. "Good." The poised woman behind Strake spoke for the first time. "Gideon," she said quietly, "let the man breathe." Strake waved a dismissive hand. "Of course, Celeste." Celeste's eyes flicked to Parmentier, brief, measuring. In that glance, Parmentier felt something colder than the sea. He excused himself from the club and left, the laughter behind him fading quickly like a mask dropped when the faces no longer watched. Outside, fog had thickened. The lanterns became floating orbs, each surrounded by a halo. Parmentier walked toward his hotel, but as he passed the edge of the pier again, he noticed something odd. On the damp planks near the entrance, where no one had walked since the woman with the caramel stall left, there were footprints. Fresh, wet, sharply defined. They weren't the woman's. Too large, too deep. Parmentier crouched. The heel had a peculiar notch. The toe showed a faint scuff, as if the wearer dragged one foot slightly. He straightened slowly. The fog shifted, and for a moment he thought he saw a figure farther down the pier, standing still beneath a lamp. Then the lamp's glow dimmed, and the figure was gone. Parmentier stood in silence, and somewhere out over the water, a buoy bell rang, once, twice, like a warning. Chapter 2, Footsteps in the Fog. The next morning, the town wore daylight like a reluctant disguise. Fog still clung to the waterline, but the streets bustled. Deliveries arrived. Shopkeepers argued with suppliers. A dog barked at nothing. Parmentier ate a modest breakfast at the hotel, toast, tea, and a boiled egg, which he peeled with care. The hotel proprietor, a bent man named Mr. Lyle, watched him with twitchy eyes. "You were on the pier late," Mr. Lyle said. "I walked." Mr. Lyle hesitated. "You should avoid walking the pier at night." Parmentier sipped tea. "Why?" "Accidents." Mr. Lyle's voice became smaller. "People slip, people fall. The sea takes what it wants." "And the sea returns nothing?" "Exactly." Parmentier paid and stepped outside. He went first to the pier entrance. The boards were drier now, warmed slightly by weak sun. The footprints from last night were gone, erased by traffic and time. Yet Parmentier could still see them in his mind, as if stamped into his memory. He walked down the pier with measured steps. The stalls were opening. The air smelled of frying batter and seaweed and coffee. Somewhere a gull screamed in outrage. He found the caramel stall again. The woman, Marie Vale, he saw now from a small nameplate, was arranging jars of sweets with sharp, efficient motions. "Good morning," Parmentier said. She didn't look up. Morning. You closed early last night. Everyone closes early now, because of the sea. Maurice's hands paused. Because of men like Gideon Strake. Parmentier lifted an eyebrow. He frightens the town. He owns it, she said flatly. Or thinks he does. Same thing. Customer approached, and Maurice sold a bag of sweets with a polite smile that vanished the moment the customer turned away. Parmentier waited. When they were alone, he said, Last night after you left, I saw footprints. Marie's fingers tightened around a jar lid. Footprints, he repeated gently. Fresh on damp boards, close to the entrance? Maris looked up then, her eyes dark. You shouldn't talk about that. So it is known, she swallowed. People have been talking, quietly. What do they say? They say someone walks the pier when no one should. They say they hear steps, slow, careful, as if the pier is counting. Parmentier's gaze drifted to the lantern posts. At what hour? After the last lantern schedule check, she said, almost unwillingly. After Nell Rook makes her rounds. Nell Rook? The widow. She handles the lamps. She's nervous lately. Parmentier nodded as if placing a piece on a chessboard. And those who hear the steps, he asked, do they see anything? Maurice's mouth tightened. Sometimes a shadow, sometimes nothing. But the next day, someone is threatened, or someone is paid a visit by Strake's men. Parmentier's eyes sharpened. So the footsteps may be a message. Maurice stared at him. Or a warning. Either way, it's trouble. And if you're wise, Monsieur Consultant, you'll keep walking straight back to your hotel. Parmentier inclined his head. I appreciate wisdom. He turned away, but as he did, he saw a man at the far end of the pier watching them, a night watchman's cap, a lean frame, hands in pockets. When Parmentier met his gaze, the man looked away quickly. Parmentier continued walking. He reached the rail and looked down at the dark water. Beneath the pier, the sea sucked and sighed. Behind him a voice spoke, rough and low. You don't belong here. Parmentier turned. The night watchman stood close now. His eyes were pale, and his jaw clenched, as if holding back words that wanted to spit. You saw the prints, the man said. I observed marks, Parmentier replied. The watchman's lips curled. That's how it starts, observing, asking, and then you end up in the sea. Parmentier studied him. Your name? Owen Pike. And you watch the pier at night. Pike's gaze flicked toward the club hall. I do what I'm paid to do. Paid by Strake. Pike didn't deny it. He rubbed his thumb over a scar on his knuckle. If you're smart, you'll forget what you think you saw. Parmentier leaned slightly closer, voice soft. And if you are smart, Monsieur Pike, you will tell me who is making those footsteps. Pike's face tightened. I don't know. Then who does? Pike hesitated, a human hesitation, full of fear. Ask Nell, he muttered at last. She hears things. She knows who's out here when it's quiet. And then Pike walked. Away, shoulders hunched, as if the weight of the pier sat on his back. Parmentier watched him go. His holiday, he thought, is already dead. Chapter 3. The man who knew too much. That afternoon, Parmentier received a visitor. He had returned to his hotel and was reviewing notes, because even on holiday he took notes, when a knock sounded at his door. Not the casual knock of a servant, a deliberate knock. 3 taps. Parmentier opened the door. A man stood there wearing a dark coat too fine for a simple errand. His hair was oiled, his eyes were nervous but arrogant. Mr. Parmentier? The man asked. Yes. I'm Dr. Finch's assistant. Well, not assistant exactly. I represent interests. Parmentier's expression remained polite. You may come in. The man entered, glancing around as if expecting hidden listeners. He sat only when Parmentier gestured. My name is Arthur Pell, the man said. This is difficult. Sablewind is not friendly to outsiders. But my employer believes you may be the only one who can help. Help with what? Pell swallowed. With Gideon Strake. Parmentier did not react. Tell me more? Pell's hands trembled slightly as he produced an envelope. This is for you. Parmentier opened it. Inside was a card with a simple message. "Meet me at the pier, Lantern Post 7, tonight at 11. Come alone, signed G.S. Parmentier looked up. Pell's face was pale. "Strake has been collecting secrets," Pell said quickly. "Secrets about everyone, about doctors, shopkeepers, the council, even the clergy. He enjoys it." "And why do you come to me?" "Because someone is going to die," Pell whispered, "and I think it will be someone who knows too much." Parmentier folded the card neatly. "And who is that someone?" Pell's eyes flicked downward. "Dr. Finch." "Dr. Finch is threatened," Pell nodded. "Strake has something on him. Something that would ruin him." "What is it?" Pell hesitated. "I don't know. Dr. Finch won't tell me, but he's been frantic. He drinks at night. He keeps checking the pier lights as if expecting them to go out." Parmentier's mind arranged the information. Footsteps, lantern schedules, threats. He asked, "Does Dr. Finch hear the footsteps?" Pell's throat bobbed. "He says he hears them in his dreams." Parmentier stood. "Tell Dr. Finch I will attend the meeting, and tell him to keep himself indoors tonight." Pell's relief was immediate. "You'll go?" "I said I am on holiday," Parmentier replied calmly. "I did not say I am blind." That evening Parmentier returned to Sablewind Pier. Fog was already crawling in from the sea, sliding over the boards like a living blanket. Lanterns glowed, each one a small sun in a world of grey. Parmentier counted the posts as he walked. 1, 2, 3. At post 7, the pier widened slightly near a locked storage stall. The sea below sounded heavier here, as if deepening. Parmentier waited. At exactly 11, footsteps sounded behind him, slow, deliberate, a drag of 1 foot. Parmentier did not turn immediately. He listened. He pictured the shoes, the gate. Then he turned. Gideon Strake stood there, hands in his coat pockets, smiling. "You came," Strake said. "I am punctual." Strake's eyes gleamed. "I like that in a man. You know, Parmentier, I did some asking today." "I am flattered." "I know what you are," Strake said softly. "A detective. Don't bother denying it. Your type always denies it." Parmentier's face remained neutral. "And if I am?" Strake stepped closer. The lantern above them hummed faintly. "Then you'll understand this town has no need of you. We handle our own problems." "Do you?" Parmentier asked. Strake's smile widened. "We do, and we will handle you too if you cause noise." Parmentier's gaze fell casually to Strake's shoes. The heel had a notch. The toe was scuffed. One sole was worn unevenly. Parmentier looked up. "You walk with a slight drag." Strake's smile faltered for half a second. "How observant," Strake said. "You made the footprints last night," Parmentier said calmly. Strake laughed, too loudly, too abruptly. "Footprints? On a pier? My dear man, everyone makes footprints." "Not with your heel notch," Parmentier replied. Fog shifted and Strake's face seemed to blur at the edges. "Are you accusing me of something?" he asked, voice suddenly colder. "I accuse you of intimidation," Parmentier said, "and perhaps of something worse." Strake leaned in close. "Listen carefully. There is a man in town who thinks he can embarrass me, expose me. He believes he's clever." Parmentier kept his voice level. "And you intend to stop him?" Strake's eyes were flat now. "He will be stopped." Parmentier watched him, letting silence stretch like wire. Then Strake turned his head slightly, as if listening. In the distance, a lantern flickered. Strake's gaze sharpened, annoyed. "The lamps," he muttered. "Always unreliable in this cursed fog." He stepped back. "This is my advice, Parmentier. Leave. Go back to wherever you came from." Parmentier's eyes remained steady. "And my advice, Monsieur Strake, is that threats are noisy. Quiet men are more dangerous." Strake's smile returned, thin and ugly. "We shall see." He turned and walked away. And as he did, Parmentier heard the drag of 1 foot, the slow, deliberate steps that had begun this whole business. Sinister footsteps indeed. Chapter 4. A Corpse by the Tide Line. Parmentier did not go directly back to his hotel. Instead, he walked farther down the pier toward the darkest stretch where fewer stalls stood and the sea below sounded like something chewing. He wanted to understand the pier, how it breathed, how it carried sound, where one could hide, where one could disappear. At lantern post 9, the fog thickened so heavily that the glow became a pale smear. Parmentier's coat grew damp. He tasted salt on his lips. He heard another sound, very faint, a small metallic clink. Parmentier stopped. He listened. The sea, the fog, the distant town music, then again, clink. He moved toward the sound, careful, silent. Near the rail, a figure stood hunched, half hidden by fog, a man, breathing hard. "Dr. Finch?" Parmentier asked softly. The figure jerked. "Who?" Parmentier stepped into the lantern's halo. "You should be indoors." Dr. Soren Finch's face was pale and slick with sweat. His eyes were wide with panic. "I can't," he whispered. "I can't stay inside. It's worse inside. I hear them." "The footsteps?" Finch nodded violently. "They're not just footsteps. They're counting, like someone measuring time." Parmentier reached out, steadying Finch's arm. "What does Strake have on you?" Finch's lips trembled. "Nothing," he said too quickly. Then he swallowed. "Everything." A gust of wind pushed fog aside for a moment, revealing the pier stretching long and empty. Finch stared down it. "He's coming," Finch whispered. "He told me to meet him here. He said if I didn't, he'd—" A lantern farther back flickered, then went out. Darkness surged along the boards like a stain. Finch gasped. "No, no, not the lamp." Parmentier's senses sharpened. If a lantern went out, someone had either cut fuel, tampered with the wick, or, more likely, Nell Rook's schedule had been interrupted. And in darkness, anything could happen. From the black stretch behind them, footsteps sounded. Slow, deliberate, one foot dragging. Finch made a strangled sound. "That's him." Parmentier positioned himself slightly between Finch and the darkness. "Stay calm," he murmured. The footsteps came closer, closer. Then a shape emerged, tall, cloaked face, obscured by fog and shadow. But it wasn't Strake. This figure moved too quietly, too smoothly, no drag. Parmentier realized the trick at the same time. The figure raised an arm, a sharp glint. "Metal!" Finch screamed. Parmentier lunged. The blade slashed, missing Finch by inches and catching Parmentier's sleeve. Parmentier grabbed the attacker's wrist, twisting, forcing the weapon down. The figure struggled, surprisingly strong. Then the attacker kicked backward, hard into Finch's stomach. Finch staggered, choking, and stumbled toward the rail. "Finch!" Parmentier shouted. Finch's hands scrabbled at the wood, slipping on dampness. Parmentier reached, but the attacker shoved Parmentier's shoulder, sending him off balance for one fatal moment. Finch toppled. There was no long scream, only a shocked exhale. And then the splash below, heavy, final. Parmentier froze, breath catching. He spun, but the attacker was already retreating into fog. Parmentier ran after the shadow, but fog swallowed distance. Lantern halos blurred. The pier became an endless corridor of light and gray. He heard one final sound behind him, footsteps, slow, dragging. This time, from the opposite direction, Parmentier stopped, chest heaving. From the fog emerged Gideon Strake, calm as if strolling home after dinner. His eyes flicked to Parmentier's torn sleeve, then to the empty rail where Finch had fallen. Strake's expression softened into something like pity, performed, rehearsed. "Oh dear," Strake murmured. "An accident." Parmentier's voice was cold. "You planned this." Strake spread his hands. "Planned? No, but predicted, certainly." Parmentier stepped closer. "There was another person, not you." Strake's gaze sharpened briefly. "Was there?" "Yes." Strake smiled, and the lantern light made his teeth look too white. "Then perhaps," he said, "your holiday is about to become very interesting." And he walked away with his dragging step, slow, measured, leaving Parmentier standing over the spot where a man had vanished into the sea. Above them, the lantern at post 9 sputtered weakly and relit, as if nothing had happened. Chapter 5. The witness who lies by dawn, Sablewind Pier, had become a mouth that could not stop talking. People gathered at the rail where Dr. Finch had gone over, some to pray, some to gossip, most to reassure themselves that they were still on the safe side of the wood. The sea below rolled on without interest, as if it had swallowed men before and would do so again without changing its rhythm. Parmentier arrived early when the fog was thin and the lanterns looked embarrassed to still be burning. He kept to the edge of the crowd, listening more than speaking. Inspector Holloway arrived shortly after, heavy boots striking the planks with the confidence of a man determined to be unimpressed by tragedy. He was broad-shouldered, his collar turned up, his expression set in a permanent frown that suggested the world had offended him since childhood. He lifted the rope barrier placed around the rail and strode in, as though the pier belonged to him by right of irritation. "You," Holloway said when he saw Parmentier. Parmentier inclined his head. "Inspector?" "I don't know what you are," Holloway continued, squinting as if Parmentier were a stain on his morning, "but I've been told you were here last night." "I was. And Dr. Finch went into the sea." "He was pushed," Parmentier replied calmly. Holloway snorted. "Everyone who falls into the sea was pushed, according to the living." Parmentier didn't argue. He had learned that the quickest way to lose an inspector was to bruise his pride. He pointed instead to the plank near the rail. "Here, the scuff marks. Someone braced a foot, then slid. Hard. That is not a simple stumble." Holloway bent reluctantly, inspected the wet wood, then straightened with a grunt that could mean anything from agreement to indigestion. "A witness says otherwise," Holloway said. "A witness?" Holloway jerked his head toward the crowd. "Owen Pike, night watchman, says he saw you arguing with Finch at the rail, says Finch was drunk, says you grabbed him and he fell." The words landed like cold water. Parmentier's expression remained controlled, but inside he felt a quiet tightening, the kind of tightening that happened when a liar's net began to close. "Pike said this?" Parmentier asked. "That's what he said," Holloway replied, watching Parmentier's face with the satisfaction of a man waiting for cracks. "Why would a night watchman lie?" Parmentier's gaze drifted over the crowd. Pike wasn't there. "A man lies for fear," Parmentier said softly, "or for money, sometimes both." Holloway's eyes sharpened. "You accusing Pike?" "I am observing probability," Holloway grunted again. "Come, we'll hear it from him." They walked down the pier toward the small watchman's booth near the club hall. The morning wind cut through the railings like a blade. Parmentier noticed as they passed lantern post 9 that the metal casing looked newly handled. Fingerprints of grease, a faint smear where someone had twisted a latch. Someone had been very close to the lantern at the moment it went out. At the watchman's booth, Pike sat on a stool, cap in his hands, face pale. He looked up as Holloway approached and immediately glanced away, like a man who had already committed a crime and was afraid the crime could be seen on his skin. "Tell him," Holloway snapped. Pike swallowed. "I already told you, Inspector. I was on rounds. I saw them, him and Finch, at the rail. They were shouting." Parmentier watched Pike's mouth. The words came too smoothly, like a script recited often. "What were they shouting about?" Holloway demanded. Pike hesitated. "Money. Finch was begging. And the foreigner, he grabbed Finch's coat." Parmentier spoke gently. "You say you were on rounds. At what time?" Pike's eyes flicked to Holloway, then back. "Around 11, maybe a bit after." Parmentier nodded. "And the lantern went out at post 9. Pike's throat bobbed. "It did." "So how did you see us clearly?" Parmentier asked, voice still polite. "If the lantern went out," Pike blinked, caught. "There are other lights." "Yes," Parmentier said. "But not close enough to see a hand on a coat. Not close enough to see faces, unless—" He leaned slightly forward. "Unless you were much closer than you claim?" Pike's jaw tightened. A bead of sweat formed at his temple, absurd in the cold air. Holloway scowled. "Answer him!" Pike's voice rose defensively. "I was close enough." Parmentier's eyes narrowed. "Then you would also have seen the second person." Silence. Holloway's posture changed. "Second person?" He chowde, repeated slowly, Pike's face drained of color. There was no— Parmentier interrupted softly, almost kindly. Pike, last night you warned me I might end up in the sea. That means you expected violence. You expected what happened. Pike's hands clenched his cap until the brim bent. Holloway stepped closer, voice low. Pike, are you lying to me? Pike shook his head, but his eyes were wet. No, Inspector, I swear— A laugh sounded from behind them, light, amused, unbothered. Gideon Strake stood at the booth doorway, hands behind his back like a gracious host. His coat was immaculate, his silver hair was combed, his eyes were bright with contained delight. Inspector, Strake said warmly, how dreadful about poor Finch, truly dreadful. Holloway's jaw clenched. This is police business, Strake. Strake's smile didn't move. Of course, I only came to offer assistance. My men will help search the waterline. We'll do what we can. Parmentier felt the air shift. Pike's fear was now a living thing, crawling up his spine. Strake's gaze touched Pike, just a glance, but it was a leash being tightened. Then Strake looked at Parmentier. And you? You were here last night, yes? Parmentier didn't answer. He didn't need to. Strake's smile widened. Such a shame. The pier attracts the strangest misfortunes. He left as easily as he came, like a man strolling through a garden he owned. When Strake was gone, Pike's shoulders sagged as if he had been holding up the ceiling and was allowed to drop it again. Parmentier said softly, He threatened you. Pike's voice cracked. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, Parmentier replied. Tell the truth. Pike's eyes squeezed shut. I can't, he whispered. If I do, he'll ruin me, or worse. Holloway slapped a hand on the booth counter. Pike, I'll ruin you myself if you— Parmentier lifted a finger, stopping Holloway, mid-rage, and spoke to Pike with a gentleness that was sharper than shouting. Pike, he said, Dr. Finch is dead. Your lie did not save him. It will not save you. It will only make you useful to Strake, and Strake uses men until there is nothing left. Pike's breath hitched. Then, very quietly, he said, I didn't see him grab Finch. Holloway froze. I saw Finch backing away, Pike continued, voice trembling, and I saw a figure, another figure, come out of the fog. I didn't see a face, I saw an arm, a flash. Finch screamed. Parmentier nodded. And the dragging footsteps? Pike's eyes opened, haunted. That's the worst part. The dragging footsteps came after, like someone wanted it heard, like theatre. Parmentier's gaze flicked involuntarily to the direction of Maris Vale's stall, Vale's Theatre Treats. The word theatre did not sit quietly in his mind. Holloway's voice was harsh now, but less certain. Why didn't you— Tell me? Pike's mouth twisted. Because Strake was waiting. Because I have a record. Because no one believes men like me against men like him. Parmentier placed one small, steadying hand on the booth counter. Inspector, he said, now we have the first truth, and from truth we can pull the rest like thread. Holloway stared at Pike, then at Parmentier, and finally looked away with a deep, reluctant exhale. All right, Holloway muttered, but if you're playing me, I do not play, Parmentier replied softly. I solve. Outside, the sea lifted and fell like a breathing chest, and somewhere down the pier, a lantern gave a faint, sickly flicker, as if remembering the moment it had died. Chapter 6. Secrets Under the Planks. Parmentier spent the next day walking the pier like a man reading a long, complicated letter. He learned the sounds, which boards moaned under weight, which boards were newly replaced, which boards were tight and which had give. He learned the patterns of people, when deliveries came, when stalls closed, when the club hall grew loud enough to hide certain noises. By afternoon, he found the thing he had been listening for, a hollow note. It came from a stretch near the midsection of the pier, between two closed fishing stalls. The boards there looked ordinary, aged wood, damp edges, but when Parmentier placed a foot on them, the sound was wrong. Not a creak, a drum. He waited until the pier thinned of people, until the gulls were louder than the humans, then knelt. With careful fingers, he traced the nails. The pattern was slightly irregular. One board had newer nails than its neighbors. A board meant to be lifted. Parmentier didn't lift it yet. Not in daylight, not while eyes could watch from windows. Instead, he went to Jasper Quill. Quill's workshop was at the pier's base, a cramped place that smelled of tar and sawdust and old storms. The carpenter himself was a thick-armed man with splinters in his fingers and suspicion in his eyes. "What do you want?" Quill asked, wiping his hands on his apron. "A question," Parmentier said. Quill grunted. "Everyone's got questions now." Parmentier's gaze drifted over the stacks of boards. "Which sections have been repaired lately?" Quill's eyes narrowed. "Why?" Parmentier smiled faintly. "Because someone hid something where the pier sounds different." Quill's face changed. It was subtle, but Parmentier saw it. The tightening at the corner of the mouth, the flicker of panic behind the anger. "You think the pier is hiding secrets?" Quill scoffed. "I know it is," Parmentier replied. Quill leaned closer, voice low. "You're a fool. Men have disappeared for less." "And yet," Parmentier said gently, "you are still here, which means you know something but haven't been silenced." Quill stared at him for a long moment, then looked away. Finally, he spat onto the floor. "There's a section near Post 8, he muttered. "Boards replaced last month. Strake paid for it." "Strake paid you?" Quill's jaw clenched. "He paid, and he threatened, same as always." Parmentier nodded. "And beneath those boards?" Quill's voice was bitter. "I'm not saying." "You don't have to," Parmentier replied. "I will listen to the pier myself." As Parmentier turned to leave, Quill added quietly, "If you lift those boards, do it at night, and do it fast. The pier has eyes." That night, Parmentier waited until the pier fell into its quieter hour, the hour when even the club's laughter dulled and the sea became the loudest thing present. Fog returned, faithful as a debt. At lantern post 8, Parmentier knelt with a small tool he borrowed from his case. Nothing dramatic, just a thin pry and a steady hand. He worked quickly, minimizing sound. The nails came loose with soft resistance. The board lifted. Beneath it, not water, but space, an intentional cavity framed with fresh wood supports. Inside the cavity lay a tin box. Parmentier's fingers tightened. He lifted the box and opened it. Inside were papers, letters, receipts, a small ledger bound in black cloth, and a second item, a strip of oilcloth folded. Parmentier unfolded it and felt his stomach go cold. It was a shoe sole, cut neatly, the heel shaped with a notch identical to the footprint he'd seen, a false sole, a disguise for prints. He placed it back carefully and took the ledger, sliding it into his coat. Then he froze. From farther down the pier he heard a sound, a slow step, then another, and a faint drag. Parmentier lowered the board swiftly, pressing it into place. He didn't re-nail it, no time. He simply stepped away into the fog, moving silently toward the shadows between stalls. The footsteps came closer, measured, deliberate. Like a man performing a role he enjoyed, Parmentier held his breath. A lantern halo approached. A silhouette entered its light, not Strake. This figure was thinner, shoulders hunched, moving with a careful tension. In one hand, the figure carried a small lantern of their own, hooded to dim the light. In the other hand, a hammer. The figure knelt at the board Parmentier had disturbed, felt along the nail heads, then started tapping. Not hard, but searching, testing. They knew the hiding place. Parmentier's mind raced. If this person found the cavity disturbed, they might run, or they might call someone. Either way, Parmentier needed identity. The figure shifted, and the lantern light lifted slightly. Parmentier caught a glimpse of a sleeve, dark with a neat cuff. Not a workman's sleeve, not Pike's, not Quill's. Then the figure stood and turned sharply, like someone who sensed they were not alone. Parmentier stepped back into deeper shadow, but a loose pebble underfoot betrayed him with a faint click. The figure's head snapped toward the sound. For a fraction of a second, lantern light struck a face, a woman, and then she fled, fast, quiet, vanishing into fog with the speed of fear. Parmentier didn't chase. He had learned that chasing in fog made you lose both the runner and yourself. Instead, he stood very still and listened. From the direction she ran, a new sound rose. Different footsteps, heavier, unmistakably dragging. Strake. Parmentier moved the opposite way at once, slipping into the pier's darker corridor of stalls, ledger tight in his coat. like a beating heart, because now he knew two things. Someone besides Strake used the pier's secrets, and someone, possibly a woman, was desperately guarding the hidden cavity. Chapter 7. The Widow's Silent Fear. Nell Rook lived in a small cottage behind the pier, where the sea wind rattled the window frames and made the curtains twitch like nerves. Parmentier visited her the next morning under the excuse of lantern maintenance, an excuse that, in Sablewind, was almost sacred. He knocked gently. After a long pause, the door opened a crack. Nell Rook peered out, a thin woman with greying hair pulled tight, eyes that looked perpetually startled. Her hands were rough from oil and metal, but they trembled as if they belonged to someone much older. "Yes," she whispered. "I am Etienne Parmentier," he said softly. "I wish to ask about your lantern rounds." Her eyes widened. "I don't talk to strangers." "You talk to the lanterns," Parmentier replied. "So you can talk to me." She hesitated, then opened the door enough to let him inside. The cottage smelled of lamp oil, damp wool, and something faintly medicinal. On a small table sat Nell's lantern schedule, a notebook filled with precise times, neat handwriting, and a few scribbled corrections. Parmentier's gaze fell on the correction marks. "Someone has forced you to change your route." Nell flinched. Parmentier's voice was gentle. "I am not here to accuse you. I am here because Dr. Finch is dead." Nell's mouth opened, but no sound came out at first. Then she whispered, "I heard." "Last night," Parmentier said. "A lantern went out at post 9. Nell's hands twisted together. "It shouldn't have, and yet it did." She looked away, tears brightening her eyes. "I didn't mean—" Parmentier leaned forward slightly. "Nell, tell me what happened the night Dr. Finch died." Nell's breath came in quick, shallow pulls, as if speaking would steal oxygen. Finally she said, "Someone came to my door." "Who?" Nell shook her head. "I didn't see fog, a hood." "A man?" She hesitated. "A voice like a man, but I'm not sure." "What did the voice say?" Nell swallowed hard. "It said, 'You will go to post 9 at 11:10. You will turn the lantern down, just for a moment. If you don't, we will show the town what your husband did.'" Parmentier's eyes sharpened. "Your husband?" Nell's shoulders sagged like a rope cut. "He drowned," she whispered. "Years ago. Drunk, fell from the pier. Everyone said it was an accident, but there were debts. Strake came after, always after, and he kept proof of things, proof that could make accidents look like crimes." Parmentier's voice was quiet. "So you obeyed?" Nell nodded, sobbing silently. "I did it. I turned the lantern down, just a little. And then I heard a scream." Parmentier let the silence stretch long enough for the truth to settle. Then he asked, "After the scream, did you hear footsteps?" Nell's face twisted. "Yes," she whispered. "Slow ones, dragging ones, like someone wanted me to hear them, like they wanted the pier to remember." Parmentier nodded. "And those footsteps, do you know them?" Nell's eyes flicked up. In them was terror and certainty. "Strake," she whispered. Parmentier's mind turned the pieces. A blackout, a staged sound, a second, attacker with smoother movement, a hidden ledger under the boards, a woman seen fleeing with a hammer. Nell wiped her face with shaking hands. "You don't understand," she pleaded. "If Strake finds out I told you, he already suspects you have," Parmentier said softly. Her face went white. Parmentier reached into his coat and placed something on the table, just the corner of the ledger, enough for her to recognize its importance. Nell stared at it, as if at a snake. "Where did you—" "Under the pier," Parmentier replied, "where men store secrets like coins. Nell, I need one more truth. Who else has access to your lantern schedule? Who could imitate your rounds?" Nell's lips trembled. "Anyone who watches me," she whispered. "And who watches you?" Parmentier pressed, gently but firmly. Nell's eyes filled again. "Mary Vale," she said suddenly. "She's always there. She closes her stall late. She sees the lamps. She sees everything." Parmentier's heart gave a slow, deliberate beat. Mary's Vale. Theatre treats, observant, guarded, close to lantern rhythms. But Parmentier didn't leap to judgment. He had learned that the obvious suspect was often the easiest to frame. He rose, smoothing his coat. "Nell," he said, "today you will do one thing. You will not touch post 9 at 11. Nell's voice shook. "He'll come?" Parmentier's eyes were calm. "Let him." As he reached the door, Nell grabbed his sleeve. "Monsieur Parmentier, please, this pier. It eats people." Parmentier looked back at her with a gentleness that didn't weaken his resolve. "Then," he said softly, "we will make it choke." Chapter 8. The lantern that went out night returned to Sablewind like an old debt. The fog arrived before the sun fully died, sliding in from the sea with patient confidence. It coiled around the pier's lantern posts, softened the sharp edges of stalls and railings, and turned familiar shapes into questions. Parmentier stood at the pier entrance shortly after 10, hands in his coat pockets, eyes calm, mind working. He had warned Nell Rook not to touch post 9 at 11. He had told Holloway only the necessary portion, enough to bring police presence without giving Strake time to shift his pieces. Inspector Holloway, for once, had listened. Now Holloway waited farther down the pier with 2 constables, men chosen not for brilliance but for solidness. Their boots were quiet, but their posture was loud, authority attempting to look natural among planks and salt air. Parmentier kept himself separate from them, a shadow that watched other shadows. The pier was not empty. Maris Vale's stall was closed. But Parmentier noticed something immediately, the faint glow of a candle behind the shutters, then darkness again, as if someone inside had checked the outside world and retreated. Owen Pike was somewhere too. He always was at night, though Parmentier did not see him. Pike was the kind of man who learned to be invisible long before he learned to be honest. At 10:58, Parmentier began walking toward post 9. He moved neither quickly nor slowly. He did not want to look like a man expecting trouble. He wanted to look like a man who belonged to the pier, like one more element of the night. Post 8, post 9. The lantern at post 9 burned steady. Its glass casing shone with a warm, oily light. Fog drifted through its halo in slow ribbons. Parmentier stopped a few paces beyond it, close enough to watch it with peripheral vision, far enough to see silhouettes approaching from either direction. He waited. 11 arrived, marked not by clocks, but by the sea's heavier inhale, by the moment when the pier felt most alone. Nothing happened. 11:01, still nothing. Parmentier's eyes narrowed slightly. Then he saw it, a flicker in the lantern flame, almost too subtle to notice. Like a blink, he stepped closer, pretending to adjust his stance, and he smelled it. Lamp oil, yeah, but also something sharper, cleaner, solvent. The flame shrank, then steadied again. Someone was tampering, but carefully, trying to create a dimming rather than a full blackout. A performance. From the fog behind him, a soft scrape sounded, a dragging step. Parmentier did not turn. He let the sound come nearer, let it announce itself, let the pier remember it. The scrape came again, then a measured footfall, slow, deliberate, confident. A shadow thickened in the fog and formed into Gideon Strake. Strake's coat was immaculate, his hair neat, his smile too calm for a man walking through fog at midnight. In his hand was a cane, more accessory than support. "You enjoy the pier at night," Strake said, as if they were old friends. "I enjoy patterns," Parmentier replied. Strake's eyes glinted. "Then you must be enjoying this one. Lanterns failing, men falling, foreigners wandering where they shouldn't." Parmentier's gaze dipped to Strake's shoes. Uneven wear? The familiar notch in the heel, real, not an added sole. "You are fond of theatre," Parmentier said softly. Strake chuckled. "Theatre? No, theatre is for people who want applause. I want obedience." Parmentier kept his tone light. "And the dragging footsteps, that is part of the show." Strake's smile twitched. "You talk too much." He took one step closer, and Parmentier heard the drag, almost exaggerated now, as if Strake wanted the world to hear it. Parmentier watched the lantern flame shrink again, just slightly, enough to turn faces into uncertainty. Strake leaned in, voice low. "You have been lifting boards, asking questions, peeking under skirts of respectable citizens." "Under planks," Parmentier corrected mildly. Strake's eyes hardened. "Either way, you've become inconvenient." Parmentier's mind ran through the possibilities. Strake did not approach alone. Men like Strake rarely did. The attacker who killed Finch had moved smoothly. No drag. That person would be close, hiding behind the darkness created by a dimmed lantern. Parmentier shifted his stance half a step, subtle, placing himself so the lantern's halo would outline anything that moved behind Strake, and then, from the fog to Strake's left, a shape appeared. A slender figure, hood up, arm lifting, a glint of metal. Parmentier moved, not backward, not away, toward. He lunged at Strake, grabbing the lapels and yanking him sideways into the lantern halo like a man forcing an actor onto center stage. The hooded figure froze for one fraction of a second, confused by the sudden change in geometry. That fraction was enough. "Now!" Holloway's voice roared from the fog, and two constables surged forward like dark bulls, seizing the hooded attacker's arms. The metal object clattered onto the boards, an oil sprayer nozzle attached to a small bottle, and beside it, a thin blade, not a knife, meant for a brawl, a surgical-looking instrument, precise, quiet. The attacker fought, twisting, but the constables held firm. Strake's eyes widened, shocked not by the presence of police, but by the realization he had been made visible. Holloway stormed into the lantern light, face thunderous. "Evening, Strake." Strake regained his smile quickly, but it sat crooked now. "Inspector, this is dramatic." Holloway grabbed the hooded figure's shoulder and yanked the hood back. A woman's face appeared in the lantern glow. For a heartbeat, Parmentier felt the answer, and the surprise collide. It was Celeste Strake. Her expression was not guilt. It was fury, pure, cold fury at being exposed. Holloway stared, stunned. "Mrs. Strake," Celeste bared her teeth slightly. "Let go of me." Strake stepped forward, voice suddenly sharp. "Celeste, what have you done?" Celeste's eyes flicked to him, contemptuous. "Don't perform now, Gideon. You hate losing control more than you hate blood." Parmentier watched Strake's face. The mask was cracking. He was not the mastermind of every move. He was the owner of the stage. But he hadn't expected the spotlight to reveal his lead actress. Holloway picked up the oil sprayer, sniffed. "Solvent, you were dimming the lantern." Celeste's chin lifted. "So?" Parmentier spoke quietly. "Because darkness is a tool. In darkness a man can be pushed, a ledger can be moved, a story can be written." Celeste laughed, short, sharp. "You think you understand? You understand nothing." "Then explain," Parmentier said. Celeste's eyes glittered. "Gladly." And Parmentier realized the most dangerous people were not those who hid. They were those who believed their truth deserved to be heard. Chapter 9. The Trap on the Pier. Holloway took them to the Pier Club Hall, not out of respect, but out of practicality. It was the only place large enough to hold witnesses, suspects, and the storm of revelation that was coming. The club's cheerful gramophone had been silenced, the lamps were turned high, the room smelled of cold gin and fear. Holloway positioned Strake and Celeste at opposite ends of the room, as if separation could prevent contamination. Parmentier stood near the center, quiet, letting the room settle. Maris Vale had been brought in too, wrapped in a coat, hair pinned tighter than usual. She looked furious at being dragged from her stall, but beneath the anger was a tremor of something else. Anticipation, perhaps, or dread. Owen Pike stood near the door, hands clasped, eyes down. Jasper Quill had been fetched from his workshop, smelling of sawdust and discomfort. Nell Rook sat in a chair, as if she might faint at any moment. Holloway slammed his palm on the table. "We're here because Dr. Finch is dead, and because someone thinks this pier is their puppet." Strake's smile returned, watery but present. "Inspector, this is unnecessary theater." Parmentier's eyes flicked to Celeste, her mouth curled. "Theater," she murmured. "Yes, that's the word, isn't it?" Parmentier spoke before Holloway could. His voice was soft enough to make the room lean toward it. "Last night," Parmentier said, "Dr. Finch did not fall. He was pushed during a lantern blackout. That blackout was ordered because darkness is useful." Nell Rook shuddered. Holloway nodded sharply. "We know the blackout was forced. Mrs. Rook told us." Strake's gaze cut to Nell like a blade. Nell looked away, shaking. Celeste's laughter broke the tension. "Poor Nell. Always obedient, always frightened. Perfect." Strake snapped. "Celeste, be quiet." Celeste turned her head slowly. "Or what, Gideon? You'll drag your foot at me menacingly?" A ripple of discomfort passed through the room. Parmentier continued. "The dragging footsteps were meant to be heard. Not because the walker needed them, but because the sound created a signature. A ghost story, a certainty, Maris Vale spoke suddenly, voice tight. People said the pier was haunted. Parmentier's eyes met hers. People were encouraged to say it. Marie's lips pressed together. Holloway barked, to scare folks off at night, to keep them from noticing what was happening under the boards. Quill swore softly. Parmentier opened the black cloth ledger and placed it on the table. Strake's face twitched. "Where did you get that?" "Under the pier," Parmentier replied, "in a cavity only someone familiar with repairs could use, receipts, letters, payments, and names." Holloway flipped pages, his brow darkened with every line. "This is blackmail," Holloway muttered. "Payoffs, threats, medical certificates, council votes, shipping schedules." Pike's knees seemed to weaken. He gripped the doorframe. Celeste leaned forward, eyes bright. "Oh, Gideon, you kept such careful records. Like a little king tallying his stolen coins." Strake's voice went hard. "Those records are mine." "They were ours," Celeste corrected. "Or did you forget who made your empire elegant?" Parmentier turned a page, then another, until he found the entry he wanted. He tapped it with a fingertip. "Dr. Finch," he said. "He paid regularly." Then he stopped, Nell whispered. "He was terrified." Celeste's expression sharpened. "Because he tried to bargain." Maris Vale's voice came out quiet, almost unwilling. "Bargain with what?" Parmentier answered. "With evidence." Holloway looked up. "Evidence of what?" Silence swelled, thick, uncomfortable. Then Celeste spoke, almost tenderly. "Of Gideon's accidents." Strake's jaw clenched. "Shut your mouth," Celeste smiled. "No." Parmentier watched her carefully. "Dr. Finch threatened to expose that some deaths on the pier were not accidents." Celeste's eyes gleamed. He had the courage to say it aloud, that was his mistake. Holloway's voice was harsh. "Are you confessing, Mrs. Strake?" Celeste tilted her head. "Inspector, I'm explaining. Confession is for people who believe you have moral authority." Holloway's hand twitched toward his baton. Parmentier raised a calming palm. "We still need the final truth, the method, the trick of the footsteps." He stood, walked to the floor near the table where rain had been tracked in, leaving a damp sheen. "Footprints," Parmentier said. "A pier's language. You made sure the pier spoke." Strake's eyes flashed. "Nonsense." Parmentier turned to Pike. "Show them." Pike flinched. Holloway barked. "Do it." Pike swallowed, then reached into his coat pocket and produced something wrapped in cloth. He unfolded it slowly, a false sole, cut and shaped, the notched heel, the scuffed toe. Gasps rippled around the room. Pike's voice broke. "He made me carry it, said if anyone asked, I'd found it in the tide muck. He wanted a story. A thing people could point to." Parmentier nodded. "A removable sole can change a print. It can create a signature. It can make anyone who wears it become the ghost." Marie Vale murmured. "So anyone could be the footsteps." "Exactly," Parmentier said. "But only one person needed the footsteps consistently, Strake, because he wanted witnesses to associate the sound with his presence." Holloway slammed the ledger shut. "And Finch? Why kill him?" Celeste's smile faded, replaced by something colder. "Because Finch stole," Strake snapped. "He stole from me." Celeste's eyes widened theatrically. "Ah, there it is. Ownership, always ownership." Parmentier's mind clicked into final alignment. "Finch didn't steal money," he said softly. "He stole a page that could destroy you." Celeste's gaze flicked. Tiny, telling. Parmentier saw it. "You have it," he said to her. Celeste's chin lifted. "Prove it." Parmentier stepped closer, voice steady. "Last night you carried solvent to dim the lantern. You carried a blade, too precise for a thug. You moved smoothly without the drag. You were the attacker who pushed Finch, while Strake arrived afterward with his dragging signature, arriving to be seen and heard in the aftermath." Strake's voice was low and furious. "Celeste!" She cut him off. "Yes, Gideon, because someone had to." Parmentier turned slightly toward Holloway. The trap worked because she came to check the hiding place under the boards last night, hammer in hand. She feared the ledger was disturbed. Holloway snapped his fingers. A constable searched Celeste's coat, quick, firm. From an inner pocket, the constable withdrew a folded sheet of paper sealed in oilcloth. Holloway opened it, eyes scanning. His face changed. "This," Holloway whispered, "is a written statement from Finch, dated last week, describing 2 accidents as staged pushes, naming Gideon Strake as responsible, and naming Celeste Strake as the one who arranged the blackmail payments." The room fell into a silence so complete the sea seemed to pause outside. Maris Vale pressed a hand to her mouth. Nell Rook began to sob. Strake's face went purple with rage. "That's a lie!" Celeste smiled faintly, and for the first time her eyes looked tired. "It's the truth you thought you could bury in fog." Parmentier's voice was soft, almost compassionate. "So you killed Finch to get this back." Celeste's smile hardened. "No, I killed Finch because he thought he could bargain with me. I wanted the paper, yes, but more than that, I wanted to punish the arrogance." Strake leaned forward, eyes blazing. "You did this behind my back." Celeste turned to him slowly. "Behind your back, Gideon? Everything I ever did was in front of your face. You just never imagined I could be more ruthless. Then you—" Holloway's voice thundered. "Enough, Mrs. Strake! You are under arrest for the murder of Dr. Soren Finch." Celeste did not struggle as constables took her arms. Strake looked at Holloway, voice trembling with outrage. "You can't—" Holloway cut him off. "Oh, I can. And you, Strake. Blackmail, intimidation, tampering with evidence, obstruction." Strake's mouth opened, but no words came, because for the first time in his life, the stage was not his. And the audience was not afraid. Chapter 10. Sinister footsteps revealed. They brought Celeste out onto the pier, lantern light washing her face pale gold. Fog licked at her heels. The sea below moved like a dark animal. Strake followed, escorted by another constable. His coat was still neat, but the neatness now looked ridiculous, like a ribbon-on at a caged thing. Parmentier walked with Holloway a few steps behind. "You were right," Holloway muttered, voice rough. "It was theatre." Parmentier's eyes remained on Celeste. "Yes, but not Maris's kind." They paused at lantern post 9. Holloway looked up at the lantern casing. "So how did she dim it?" Parmentier pointed to a tiny seam. "Solvent sprayed onto the wick housing, not enough to extinguish the flame, just enough to shrink it. In fog, even a small dimming turns faces into guesses." Holloway's jaw tightened. "And the footsteps?" Parmentier glanced at Strake's shoes, then at Pike standing nearby, trembling but upright. "2 layers," Parmentier said. "First, a false sole with the notched heel, a signature print that could be applied to any shoe. Second, the dragging gait, a performance." Holloway snorted. "A grown man acting like a monster." Parmentier's expression was faintly grim. "Men like Strake understand something simple. People fear what they can identify. Give fear a sound, drag, scrape, step, and it becomes a story. A story spreads faster than truth." Strake barked. "I did nothing." Celeste turned her head slightly, smiling at him with quiet poison. "You did everything, Gideon. You just didn't hold the knife." Parmentier watched her carefully. "You used his reputation as camouflage." Celeste's eyes gleamed. "Of course. Everyone already believed Gideon capable of anything. Why not let them keep believing it, while I moved unseen?" Holloway's voice was cold. "You're proud." Celeste shrugged, almost elegant. "Pride is all a woman like me is allowed, Inspector. I built his empire with better taste and sharper teeth. Finch tried to steal one of my teeth." Nell Rook's sobs rose again. "My husband, was it you? Was it—" Celeste looked at Nell with mild interest, like studying a fragile ornament. "Your husband was sloppy. The pier did the rest." Nell made a small broken sound and collapsed into the arms of a constable. Holloway's face contorted with rage. "Get her out of here." The constables led Celeste away. Her heels clicked lightly on the planks. No drag now, no need. Strake struggled, voice hoarse. "You can't take me down because of her madness." Holloway stepped close enough that Strake could smell his anger. Your madness built the stage she danced on, Strake. Don't pretend you're innocent because someone else played the lead. Strake's eyes darted to Parmentier, pleading now, furious and afraid. You came here to ruin me, Parmentier answered quietly. No, I came for sea air. Strake barked a laugh that sounded like choking. Liar! Parmentier's gaze softened, not with pity, but with certainty. I never lied, Monsieur Strake. I only observed. They escorted Strake toward the pier entrance. The club hall behind them looked smaller now, less powerful. Marie Vale stood near her closed stall, watching, face pale. When Parmentier approached, she spoke with tight control. So it was her? Parmentier nodded. Celeste had the precision. Strake had the intimidation. Together, they made the town obedient. Maurice's eyes lowered. And Finch? He tried to escape, Parmentier said. And people like them do not allow escape. Marie looked toward the fog-shrouded water. Will it be quiet now? Parmentier's gaze followed hers. The sea made no promises. It will be quieter, he said. But the pier will remember. Places always do. Marie swallowed, then said softly, You're leaving, then? Parmentier paused. The question contained more than curiosity. It contained a fragile hope that he might stay, the way people hope a storm chaser might keep storms away. Yes, Parmentier said gently, soon. And if another storm comes, Parmentier allowed the faintest smile, then perhaps someone local will learn to be braver than fog. He turned to go. Behind him, Sablewind Pier creaked, an old sound, familiar now, almost ordinary. And for the first time since his arrival, Parmentier heard no dragging footsteps, only the sea, only the wind, only the quiet truth that without fear to amplify it, a monster's steps are just steps.